All right, we are back. This is going to be part two of Mr. Winston, MIT, teaching a public speaking class. So last time I thought he said he was going to give some examples, but then he gave some samples, and I thought examples, but samples of stuff. I didn't really understand it too much. He talked about circling a problem, and I think that just means repeating. We'll see what this other stuff is about. Let's get right into it, man. Let's get into his second sample thing that he talks about.
I want to build a fence around it.
Build a fence around it. Okay. What does that mean?
So that it's not confused with somebody else's idea.
Oh, okay.
So if you're
maybe an example?
And I was teaching you about what an arch is.
Yeah.
I might say to you, well, that's an arch.
Yeah.
And that's not to be confused with some other things that other people might think is an arch. This is not an arch. That's not an arch. I'm building a fence around my idea so that it can be distinguished from somebody else's idea.
Oh, I hope you give me something more specific.
In a more technical sense, I might say, well, my algorithm might seem similar to Jones's algorithm, except his is exponential and mine's linear. That's putting a fence around your idea so that people can.
That's giving a poor example is what that is. So oh man, we're going to get all this like generic, weird examples that you can apply to your day to day. Okay. So MIT, listen, when you talk about building a fence, what he's essentially saying is saying what's currently out there and why you're different. So if you're going to talk about, let's say, some postdoctoral research on the biosphere, and you can say current research describes A, B, C, and D, right? But I wanted to focus on this part that no one talks about. I'll give you, and that's fine as a generic way to explain it, but then you have to follow up with specific examples. So for example, if you're talking about drug treatment, you could say, so all the research in terms of like dealing with people with drug addiction is with methadone. But are there other treatments that we can use? Like, for example, today I want to talk to you about Suboxone. And Suboxone does the same things that methadone does, but with less side effects, or is better tolerated, or is more efficacious, requires less milligrams. So it's easier to transport. And then that's called building a fence around Suboxone. But let's talk about business school, man. So if you're saying essentially when you pitch, one of the strategies that I communicate when you pitch an idea is this. First, you identify the problem, then you identify all the current solutions, and then you say, here's why they're not good enough. Then you introduce your solution. Another way to think about it is he's essentially talking about a debate technique that a lot of politicians use. What he's essentially talking about is the concept of reactance. Here's what reactance says. When you tell someone what to do, you will naturally want to resist. When your mom or your dad says, hey, make sure you put on a jacket before you go outside, you always want to be like, you almost want to not do it out of spite. That's resistance to an idea because you feel like it impedes on your ability to choose. Therefore, here's what good politicians, good debaters do, because it's almost impossible to make someone like an idea. Put your jacket on. Instead, it's very easy to make people dislike an idea. So what he's saying when he says build a fence could be better explained or better used by first saying, problem, what's currently out there, why it's not good enough, your solution. Let me give you another example. The Dyson vacuums. And this is what you need, sir. Specific examples, not like my algorithm, generic thing, specific examples, sir. So the whole thing about Dyson was the fact that it doesn't have vacuum bags that you have to change out. Right? So when you say about building a fence around the idea of a vacuum, here's what I would do. There's lots of vacuums. We've had vacuums for 40 years, for 50 years. Then you throw a question at them. So what makes this any better? What makes this so different? And right away, people are like, yeah, what makes this so different? And this is you building a fence right now. This is a better way to explain building a fence. You ask a question, why does it make so different? Well, number one, it has just the same amount of pull, of suction, but there's no bags to replace. The number one thing people hate about using vacuum is replacing those bags and constantly having to buy new bags. That is the game changer. nothing to maintain, no bags to replace. And because of that, it goes from this big clunky thing to this little tiny tube. So yes, it is a vacuum, but it's a better vacuum because of A, B, and C. See the problem, what's currently out there, right? Why it's not good enough? My pitch, my solution. That could be a better way to go into this concept of building a fence. And I'm winging this as I go. So, but if I had prepared for this, I would give you I would be ready to show you building a fence with, in biology, in physics, in engineering, in nursing, in finance. These are the kind of examples you should be giving people. And you should give them multiple. All right, what else we got here? Show me what you got.
Not be confused about how it might relate to something else.
Because this and that, this thing for the other thing, it just doesn't work that well.
Of samples is the idea of verbal punctuation.
What? What does that even mean? But he's going to explain it. I hope he's going to explain it. You're going to explain? Verbal punctuation. Okay, gang. So this could be a good, okay. This is a good example of setting up uncertainty. If he's going to do what I hope he does, you know, and like I said, I don't know the future. I don't know what he's talking about. If you say verbal punctuation, the first thing you did, you're like me, you're like, what does that even mean? So that sets something up. That sets up curiosity. That puts a dopamine increase into your brain for prediction to activate area 47, right? Shout out to the book, The Organized Mind. You should read it. Check it out. I'll put a link down below. It's a great book about how decision making. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about, is it, good friends? No, we're talking about his idea of, let's go back to him here. See, short-term memory, I totally forgot. Verbal punctuation, verbal punctuation. Let's see if he explains it and gives us some solid examples.
And the idea here is that because people will occasionally fog out and need to get back on the bus, you need to provide some landmark places where you're announcing that it's a good time to get back on. So I might, in this talk, say something about this being my outline. The first thing we're going to do is talk about how to start. Then we're going to deal with these 4 samples. And among these 4 samples, I've talked about the first idea, that's cycling. The second idea, building, and now the third idea is verbal punctuation. So I'm enumerating, I'm providing numbers, I'm giving you a sense that there's a seam in the talk and you can get back on. Okay.
That is, I don't like, see, that's the illusion of information, because it seems reasonable, but unless you show me a specific example of how it is applied, then it's useless. Here's the example you used, but you didn't really clarify. So here's what I'm taking from this. If you have an agenda, okay, in a presentation, every time you move on to the next point of the agenda, show them the agenda again. Like literally, it can be your slide repeating, repeat the agenda, beautiful way, and then recap. Throw out a rhetorical question. So what do we know so far? Agenda. Talk. So we know A and B. What's the next thing we need to know? That allows, and each time you do that, you show them the agenda again, and that allows you to repeat over and over and over. Do you know what I mean? You know what? Let me show you an example. Okay, so I'm going to share this. This is just a presentation from I got from SlideShare, and I just kind of tweaked it a little bit. Okay, so here we are. Okay, this is a standard presentation, right? You know, it's a case study on Heineken. So you have this overview, and I think this is what he's getting at. Okay, giving people a chance to kind of catch up. Here's your overview. Now, you go through the presentation. But then, before you move on from corporate objectives to background, go back to your slide agenda and remind people what they've learned. And then if you want to go bonus points, you say, now that we know the corporate objectives and goals, the next question is, what do we know about the company? And you see, now that we know A, the next question is B. That's a formula that I love to use. And then you get into the company, the industry, blah, 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 blah. So now we know what Heineken needs to do. We understand what the beer industry looks like. The next question is, what are the obstacles? And notice, because I'm using that little formula, I've recapped and then introducing next idea with a question to engage you. Talk about the problem. Boom. All right. We know that our goal is blank. We know that the beer industry is currently in a place of consolidate. Okay, I'm going to do this for realsy. Okay. So we know that we need to appeal to a broader range of individuals with specific beer types. Latinos with a Latino focused beer to compete against Corona. We know that we want to get like lower calorie beer to appeal to people who want to have a beer but are worried about the calories, right? We understand that the beer industry is in an area of consolidation. So the big beer companies are buying up all the microbreweries, and we right now are in a place where we are playing catch up. That's the biggest problem. So let's take a little look at Porter's 5 forces, and let's figure out what that says about what our strategy should be moving forward. Or I could say, after all that, so let's take a look at a 5 forces analysis. What does it tell us about what we should do? And I think that's what he's trying to get at. Notice at every new section, I give you a chance to catch up by literally just repeating my agenda before I move on and using a transitional sentence. Now that we know A, the next question is B. Now that we know A and B, now that we know A and B, the next question is C. And that is how you could do verbal punctuation. Is that what he was talking about? All right. I'm going to end this one today, a little shorter than the previous ones, but maybe what I'll do is I'll address each one of his samples. Well, there's only one more because he said there was 4. I'll address the next sample in its own video just to make these a little more digestible. If you like what I'm doing, gang, if you're liking these ideas, if you want more examples or more strategies, remember I have links down below. I have a Udemy class on public speaking and a Udemy class on presentations and how to use slides and visuals when you are presenting, and you can check those out below. Thank you so much. See you next time. Speaker breakdown. Me looking like a 1980s hip hop artist, 1980s b-boy.